BlizzCast, your official Blizzard podcast.
Hello everyone, this is Zaram with the community team welcoming you to BlizzCast 15. We're getting into the thick of World of Warcraft Cataclysm this episode, covering content and world design with lead developers Corey Stockton and Alex Afraziabi, hearing more about the latest music and sound design from director of audio Russell Brower and senior composer Derek Duke, learning about the art of voiceover with casting producer Andrea Toyas, and wrapping things up in a discussion with lead system designer Greg Street. I'm joined now by World of Warcraft lead content and world designers Corey Stockton and Alex Afraziabi to discuss what they've brought to the table in Cataclysm. Hey guys.
Hi.
How's it going?
Not bad, how you doing?
Not too bad.
Amazing.
Alright, so players have been discussing ideas for the next expansion pretty much since Wrath hit store shelves. Many felt that nothing could compare to the story of Lich King. When brainstorming for the third expansion, how did the development team settle upon the storylines which will play out in Cataclysm?
We, first to address the Lich King thing, it definitely occurred to us that Arthas and the Lich King were huge characters, and it would be very difficult to come up with an equally or more compelling storyline. But we still have a stable, if you will, of amazing characters to kind of pull from. So we'd been working on, the Deathwing story behind the scenes for a while and what he's been doing, because we knew at some point we wanted to bring him out. And it just so happened that this was the point. Something that we probably did really poorly, actually, in Lich King that didn't help our case for pushing this one out was the Obsidian Sanctum. That was kind of one of our initial tie-ins for this, because we'd been in the process of doing this one since, Lich King release, so we knew exactly what we were working on. And we never really conveyed it properly through that storyline, and so it was more of a surprise, I think, than it should have been.
The way content has been developed and presented to players has changed quite a bit over the years. New tools, new systems. How did you approach redesigning old zones in Azeroth to make them engaging for new and old players alike?
I think, it's kind of hard to explain what we did specifically, because there were so many things we wanted to do to those zones. But I think first and foremost, we wanted to take the level of quality that we had in Northrend from a questing perspective and apply that back to all zones all the way back. And I think what ended up happening is, not only did we achieve that Northrend level, but I think we probably exceeded it in a lot of ways with things that players aren't really expecting. I think the big thing to us is that so many of those zones hold a nostalgic place for players because they spent so much time there. So for us, it was really important to go back and rework things so that they felt better from a quest perspective, from spawning, storylines, pretty much everything. But in the same vein, being able to keep a lot of that original hit of why people liked the zone. When we went back and redid Silverpine, of course it's got new Forsaken buildings and it looks different, but it's got that same vibe. When you go there, it's not going to feel completely different. And we definitely did that kind of stuff on purpose. So, we go around saying it's completely new, everything's going to feel different. And it will, from a gameplay perspective, it'll feel much better. But I think the nostalgia of WoW and original zones are still going to be there.
Yeah, totally. And something else that we've, I think, commented on dozens of times in interviews, which is we've learned a lot. We have the Quest team is a team right now full of veteran designers. These guys have been designing for WoW for some near 7 years at this point, and there have been so many lessons and mistakes that we've made in previous expansions that we've learned from, and all of those were applied to Cataclysm questing and content design and zone design and all that good stuff. So from Corey's illustrator maps of how we're going to redo a zone to our designer flowcharts, everything was so meticulously designed that what I think, at least, that we've brought back to the world is a sense of story and a sense of immersion that was absent. That in my opinion doesn't even exist in Northrend. Which Northrend, amazing as it may be, I still think that our Cataclysm zones and our revamp zones are way tighter.
Sort of playing into that, so whether a player is creating, their very first character or maybe their 20th character, how will that leveling experience from 1 to 60 different Cataclysm from from the original experience?
It's way more streamlined. Again, we've learned so much from designing for WoW for so many years. We're all not just veteran designers, but veteran players. We've all been playing since the very beginning, and from a player perspective, we know what we don't like, and we know we like to think we know what players don't like. I think we do a pretty decent job of that, and those things play a huge role in our design process there.
Yeah, when you're thinking about re-rolling that alt, right, and you're working on this zone,
Right.
the last thing you're going to want to do is put something in there you're going to, in any way, is going to think that's going to be crappy, right?
Yeah.
Especially because we're the ones, we're going to be doing this exact same thing that the players are doing. So that's the last thing we want to see either. And I think a lot of us here in the team have re-rolled so many times with different characters and gone through the same 1 to 10 starting experience, and then getting out into the world and going from there and deciding, well, you kind of run out at a certain point. You run out of options because you've done all of it.
Right.
And I think that's one thing we wanted to do here, is we really affected the flow is a big thing people are going to see that's different. The level changes that you see across the board, zones aren't the same from a level perspective anymore at all. You get dumped out in Barrens and you're looking at this, 15 level range zone, and it's gigantic. Obviously when we look at that, the first thing is we want to do something to make that better. So we cut it in half, split it in the northern and southern Barrens.
Right.
And things like that. We started off talking about at BlizzCon last year that we were going to do selectively some of this stuff, to zones, maybe here, maybe there. What ended up happening is that, we got to a point where we didn't really want to leave anything out.
Right.
We had broken up all the zones into red, yellow, and green, and we're only going to do this much. Somehow, being Blizzard, we thought we'd get away with that, which we didn't at all. We ended up basically touching everything. And I think a lot of that is from exactly what Alex was saying, that, we didn't want to be in that situation where you hit level 45 and then your 45 to 50 zone is nowhere near the quality level of like the 10 to 15 zone that you were in, right? So I think when we get to that point, we were just like, well, we've got to figure out a way to do something to these zones.
Yeah,
So.
we absolutely made the time. I think ultimately what you're going to get from a re-roll or a new player perspective going through Azeroth and 1 to 60 is a highly enjoyable, highly immersive, fun, content-driven experience where, and I've seen this word thrown around a bit now on the forums and through fan sites and whatnot, and I think it does come off as effortless. I think you'll start your questing experience and your player's journey, and before you know it, you're 25 hours in, haven't had any sleep, and because they do carry you that well, like the progression and the flow is really tight.
Right. So I guess it's in terms of more focused storyline in each zone, but then you also don't hit those random, I need to find another zone to go to because all of a sudden all the quests are too high level for me here.
We tried to get rid of the hills and valleys, right? You want it to feel smooth the whole way through. And I think that was definitely one of the biggest goals that we feel like we've achieved. I think effortless is a great way to describe it.
Yeah, it does feel effortless. And even in those zones, like one of the earlier complaints I heard is that the zones were too linear. And it's kind of funny because I think back to when we were doing the Death Knight area. The players are always, very concerned about well, what if it breaks, and I have to keep going back to that as like the, millions and millions of people went through the Death Knight starting experience, and that was the most linear experience you could ever imagine. And that's exactly what you beta testers are here for, to make sure that we're catching all these bugs and making sure that your experience is top notch, that these things won't break, and that when you do get there on live, that you won't be stopped or hampered by any kind of weird bugs. So, and they've been doing a great job on the forums. I think our beta testers are doing an amazing job with feedback and the feedback we're receiving and the bugs and all that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So speaking of new cool stuff, the starting experience for Worgen and Goblins is pretty much unlike that of any of our other races. How did the feel of each starting area and storyline really develop for these two races, and what makes creating a character of either race special? To the player, that is.
Sure. We intentionally went at the Worgen and Goblin lines very differently because they're very different races. The Worgen we kept as the more serious experience, less goofiness, and the Goblin, if anyone's played the Goblin, they know it's full of Goblin zaniness, and that's really to represent the kind of the character of these races, and that was really, really important. This feeling essentially emanates out to everything, their architecture and the structures, their society, their language even. So that was one approach that we took, and as usual, we wanted to go big with these zones and big with the experience, and so we pulled out all the stops. It's a tech roller coaster. All our good big tech. A lot of it originated here, like stuff that you'll see in the 80 to 85 zones. This is where it started. A lot of the phase terrain and the auto questing and the flow and things like that. This is where we developed them. So to one degree, it's all very tight and very different and awesome. But it's also kind of more of a experienced WoW player zone, start zone, which is kind of what we'd agreed upon. Like when we kind of sat down and assessed things, we said, well, there's so many cool things and so many different things here that it might be a little bit rougher on the true newbie. But for a veteran WoW player, this is definitely one of those amazing experiences.
So kind of speaking on that, one thing we see from players a lot of times is, when Draenei and Blood Elves came out, people were stoked on them, and then they kind of felt like once you got past your initial zones, you see a little bit of them in Outland, but essentially they're kind of cut out of the storyline in other areas. So obviously redesigning the old world kind of makes that easier to incorporate new races, but what did you guys learn from adding the Draenei and Blood Elves, going into creating goblins and Worgen and making them feel like a part of the Horde and Alliance?
I think, definitely we learned that we can't leave them out. You can't just... You can't leave Azure Mist and Blood Mist and head into Ashenville and then feel like, and not see anything Draenei. It just feels a little foreign. Same thing with the Blood Elf. You walk out of Ghostlands and it's pretty much the last Blood Elf tower you're going to see until Hellfire Peninsula, I think.
Right.
And I think that affected a lot of players because it feels like that experience is then kind of, it's separated. It doesn't feel part of the world as a whole. Yeah. And the fact that we had a chance to redo the whole existing world, I think definitely helped. You can take a look at something like Ajara for the goblins, obviously a huge influence. The Worgen stuff that's happening in Silver Pine, you can see things there. You can see it all throughout the world. And I think a big thing is that we had all these assets because we built those two zones first. We did Lost Isles and we did Gilneas. So the level designers basically had all of those assets while we were redoing the original world. So anywhere that we had a chance to use that stuff, they would work as close as they could with the quest guys and figure out a place that it made sense. Where can we fit this in? Where it makes sense. It doesn't need to look like it's jammed in, but wherever we can do it, where it feels right, let's go for it. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that here than we ever did, specifically with Burning Crusade.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Corey hit it. I think without the benefit of having to redo the entire world, it would have been a lot more difficult to get the Worgen Goblin coverage that we did. But I think this expansion hit it right.
Cool. So moving on to the bad guys, Deathwing is pretty much, I would say, the primary antagonist. I don't think there's much argument there. But his rise does seem to rekindle or ignite a host of other conflicts in the world. I've played a little bit of beta. I know players looking to level beyond 80, they'll quickly discover that in the 78 to 80, or now 80 to 82 zones, Mount Hyjal and Vashir. Will you talk a little bit about the conflicts taking place in those two zones and kind of the roles players will play there as they shift into these new 80 to 85 zones?
Yeah, totally. So we have the overarching Deathwing story, right? Deathwing breaks through the essentially the middle of the world, the elemental planes. He transcends them and cuts through the what is the Well of